with the development of the World Wide Web was a technological solution built at CERN that meshed with the hippie dream. Little wonder, then, that the web was set on a collision course with conventional notions of social order and hierarchy.
Well, the revolutionary thing, I think, was that it let people be very free. It constrained them as little as possible. It allows you to publish whatever you like. It allows you to publish in any format. But the really important thing was it could be done on a server without asking anybody else, without having to register.
For most of Western history, you had an authority framework that was vertical. God on top and you on the bottom, and Dad and the Pope and the King and whomever, you know, somewhere in that great white column. And suddenly authority, as a technical matter and as a political matter, was horizontal.
I mean, when you listen to people like Berners-Lee and all the rest of the crowd, they idealize this notion for the first time in human history. We've created something without a center. It can't be controlled. Well, the reason we created it is because these people were opposed to the notion of hierarchy and authority. So it wasn't an accident. They created their ideological wet dream.
And there was one final thing that turned the web into a kind of kryptonite, threatening to subvert society and the 20th century economic model. It was given away for free.
Tim Berners-Lee is someone who invented something of unbelievable power, but has turned his back on any kind of profiting from it, really. And I think we should celebrate him, not just his ingenuity, but the World Wide Web worked because he opened it up, because it was free for all to use. It's true open source in that sense, and he should be daily thanked by everybody who gets any pleasure or profit out of the World Wide Web for that supreme act of generosity, selflessness, and idealism.
Tim created a kind of set of tools, if you like, which he gave away to the world and said, I've created this toolbox, I'm not quite sure what to do with it, but see what you can do with it. And by giving that away, rather than controlling it, he started a whole process of huge social and cultural innovation.
But the very success of the web would rouse a giant. The idea that it was a creative space where all could participate equally would quickly be confronted by a very different model that saw the web as a place to buy and sell rather than to share. This kick-started a constant cycle of revolution and counter-revolution that still shapes the web today. And to understand the nature of this conflict, we have to jump back in time.
The year was 1975. Pink Floyd was on the radio, Jaws was at the cinema, and the Vietnam War had just finished. But it was also the year that a young Harvard dropout named Bill Gates arrived in Albuquerque, New Mexico.
Gates had come to New Mexico to work for a small company called MITS. And 30 years ago, some of MITS's biggest customers were amateur rocket enthusiasts.
For rockets, we wanted to be able to do something more than just shoot them up and have them come back down. And the MITS Corporation created the first really small instrumentation packages so that we could take data, much like you'd take data and plug it into your computer today.
MITS soon moved on to more sophisticated electronics, creating the earliest affordable home computer, the Altair 8800, helping to set in train the revolution which would lead to the wired world of today.
The personal computer was the template on which the web had to be created. You had to have millions of these common machines in order for it to make any sense.
Bill Gates was developing BASIC, a programming language for the Altair. He saw the potential to make big money from software at a time when most personal computer users were hobbyists who gave it away for free.
He ended up at the West Coast Computer Fair, and I remember this fellow. We were all trading software back then, and I remember this fellow in a suit and telling everybody, hey, you shouldn't be giving away software to one another. You should be paid for your development. And we all laughed at him.
Did you?
Yes.
And now how do you feel? Do you think that's different?
I think he's a very rich man. That's why.
Gates had negotiated a royalty from each copy of the Altair software that was sold. So when he found out that hobbyists from the Homebrew Computer Club in California were making pirated copies, he was furious.
Well, we had one copy of the tape that our club library had purchased. And one member of the club took that tape and borrowed it for 2 weeks. And when he came back, he brought back like 4 copies. And we got a letter from Bill Gates, all upset, copyright, you're copying software and you shouldn't. Because it was basically, hey, you have to pay for what you use.
When we started Microsoft and some people were copying the basic tape, I said in a letter, hey, we'll write more software if more people pay us. Something should be free and something should be paid for.
20 years later, Bill Gates and Microsoft would return to restage this battle online. The software for the World Wide Web had been given away for free because Tim Berners-Lee, like earlier pioneers, believed the online world should be about an ideal of sharing. For Bill Gates and others like him, it was simply the biggest business opportunity of the century.
The early internet felt like a radical departure from business as usual. There was this other dimension to human experience, which is really hard to relate to today, that had nothing to do with money. When business came onto the internet, the object of the game was to monetize this thing.
Before the web, the internet was administered by a public body and business was banned. This was only overturned in 1994, and these two opposing ideologies would slug it out in a battle for the soul of the online world. The most significant conflict began in 1995, when Microsoft launched Internet Explorer and set out to beat all competition. They effectively forced computer manufacturers to sell machines with it pre-installed. From nowhere, Microsoft ended up with more than 90% of the market.
Hey, this is software. We can do anything.
Only legal action by governments prevented total domination and the risk of the web becoming a kind of branded Microsoft experience.
Microsoft is a monopolist, and it engaged in massive anti-competitive practices that harmed innovation and limited consumer choice.
But the legal battle wasn't just about Microsoft. It was about two completely different ideas of what the web should be.
I think right from the beginning, there are kind of two competing views about the web playing out, which still play out now. One is that the web is this home for collaboration, for sharing, for allowing information to be free, for people being able to create things together in open platforms and sharing ideas. And that's embedded in the kind of geek hippie culture of the Homebrew Computer Club right at the start of all this in the 1970s. And then there's another, which is the kind of Bill Gates, Microsoft corporate view, which is, wait a minute, how do you pay the mortgage?
The legal ruling meant Microsoft had had its wings clipped, but the commercial ideology it represented was in the ascendant. And in this, the era of the dot-com boom, it seemed the web was ripe for business exploitation. But soon, the balance of power would shift once more.
As Internet Explorer popularized the web, bringing millions online, people began to learn what the web could do, for better and for worse. Its potential and our potential would pose a particular challenge to traditional notions of ownership, creativity, and power.
The web's anti-business leveling potential was about to re-emerge in a shocking new way. It would undermine centuries-old notions of copyright and property. The story begins with an 18-year-old in a college dorm room.
I started it, just because I thought it was exciting. It was just sort of a small project.
It ends a few years later with a multi-billion-dollar industry on its knees and more in the firing line.